Welcome back to the Athlete Hackers podcast. My name is Chris Schrade.
And I am Mark Spellman. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get to our next guest, we'll have a rundown of our last guest, Mr. Bert Sorn. Chris, what were your thoughts on Bert?
Well, we went in a lot of different directions, and I can imagine everyone could kind of think where it went, but I was most impressed because we did something that we have not touched on before, which was hunting. So, Bert kind of told us how his training helps him with his hunting, and how hunting could actually possibly help in the idea of multiple sports for youth athletes, how that may tune up an athlete and translate over into other sports.
From my end, the importance of your tribe and the importance of having like-minded people together, and not only like-minded people, but people that also have opposing thoughts to your thought pattern, and bringing them together. And the big thing that he touched on was their Summer Strong conference that they have down in South Carolina. Started when Pops had a birthday and wanted to have some friends over to lift some heavy weights, drink some good beer, eat some good food, and talk about strength and conditioning. So
yeah, I think that whole tribe talk came when we were speaking about Summer Strong. That's where it all came about.
So no, just remember that when you're with your people, that the people you keep company with, that's your tribe, that's your group. So surround yourself with good people and you'll do good things. On that note, it is my pleasure, it is my honor to introduce our next guest, Mr. Jesse Wright, best-selling author, multi-year, I'm not going to say decades, but it's probably decades in the NBA strength and conditioning coach, and a friend of mine, Mr. Jesse Wright. How are you today?
Mark and Chris, I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me on here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for coming on, man. It's a pleasure.
I would be remiss because I said best-selling author, but then I didn't say the book. So you'll find that as before we got on the air, you said we do a good job with this, but sometimes we don't do a great job. So the book Jesse wrote is The Intent is to Grow. The website that he has is Balance the Bar. For those in this profession, if you have an opportunity, definitely check both of those out. I was lucky enough to be a part of the Balance the Bar symposium that Jesse put on. And if you're still intending to grow in our profession and you have not checked out that seminar, get on it now. As Jesse will probably touch on, in this profession, and as long as we've both been in this profession, if you're still not growing and getting better on a daily basis, you're going to be passed by and you're going to be out of the business very quickly. So, Jesse, what prompted you, one to write a book, two, to put the Balance the Bar symposium together, and what's going on?
Yeah, well, thank you for that endorsement and introduction. I really couldn't have said the purpose or the intent, no pun intended, behind those two initiatives better than you just did. So thank you very much for that. So your first question about the book probably falls into a similar category as many authors. Like you have these experience in whether it's your personal life or your profession, and maybe even conversations, and people go, oh, that'd be a cool book someday or something. And for me, what it started with actually a presentation I gave at the 2016 NBSCA Continuing Education Conference. That's the Strength Coaches Association in the NBA, who they hold a continuing education event every year surrounding the NBA Combine. And it was a talk I gave on, the title of it was called Advance, and it was the qualities of today's successful strength and conditioning coach. And it had nothing to do with anything related to programming, right? Or injury risk reduction, or improving linear speed, or improving rate of force production. Nothing about that. There's much smarter people in the world that should be talking about that stuff than me, that's for sure. But it had everything to do with the skills that make a good coach, right? Connection and assertiveness and voice and presence and empathy and compassion and all that stuff. And I gave the talk that year. I gave it the following year at the NSCA in Vegas in 2017. And after both events, many people, you know, that long line that you get after you give a talk and everything, they were like, this would be a great book. Thank you for the information. The young coaches were like, I didn't even consider a lot of what you said. And then the old salty dogs, like the three of us, right? They were all like, great topic. This isn't talked about enough. And then you just park it in your brain, like, yeah, it would be a cool book someday. And it just sat there, and, you know, life gets in the way, and, you know, job stuff gets in the way. And then last year when my time with the 76ers ended, I kind of was like, well, screw it. There's no reason not to write a book anymore. And I literally started on it the next day. I started storyboarding some of the characters and came up with the idea that it was going to be a novel instead of a traditional nonfiction. And 10 months later, it was a finished product.
And I'll be honest, I don't have the book yet. Keyword in that sentence yet.
Yeah.
But I think it goes well hand in hand with Balance the Bar Symposium, where a lot of the topics that you were discussing with your guests were the soft skills, and I'll do the quote, soft skills that we need to be successful in strength and conditioning. I mean, Chris has heard it a bunch of times. You're not going to correct somebody's squat until you know their name and know something about them. I mean, if you go into a facility day one of your new job and you just start barking out corrections on how to lift, but you don't know anybody's name in the facility, you've already lost the facility.
Yeah.
Because they're all going to look at you and go, who's this jackass? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was taught by the guy before you or the girl before you how to do it this way. Why are you coming in and telling me something completely different? I don't even know you. I don't trust you yet. And I think a lot of people that get into our profession don't understand the relationship and the trust that you all have to have with one another in order for it to be a successful partnership. So if you could talk a little bit about that, on what, with your time in the professional ranks, college ranks, where do you see, because like you said, programming and stuff like that, that's kind of like ground floor. Like those are the hard skills that you have to have. Mm-hmm. If you can't program and make your athletes stronger, faster, fitter, healthier, you're not going to be in the profession. So it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
But how do you get to be a coach like yourself and be able to withstand several coaching changes, several administrative changes, several ownership changes, and still be able to stay in the profession and be very successful at your profession?
Yeah, you hit it in your description right there. I think it's a recognition and awareness thing for me. And there are many people doing good work in this space, right? This type of call it pedagogy or whatever, this skill set that all good coaches and leaders need to develop. My thing is, it's just not talked about enough. I would like to pile on, right, and maybe take it in a different angle and give it a different flavor and package the skills a little bit differently. And that's kind of where Balance the Bar came from, where I wanted to bring together not just me. I certainly have my thoughts and my intentions behind the message that I would like to deliver relative to interpersonal skills and coaching and high performance, but also wanted to bring other successful people in their space to talk about it as well. And that's where the virtual summit came from, was calling on experts, really like some of these like really well-known people in their space, some from the research world, some from the coaching world, some from different leagues, male, female, and allow them to tell their stories relative to this skill set that is so critical to long-term success and impact with athletes. Like you just said, there's not a single athlete in the world where if you just bark out a command in the middle of the room is going to respond to that well. Number one, on a fundamental level, they might not even know who you're talking about, because there might be 20 to 25 athletes in the room. So you better know their name, right? You better look them in the eye and find an impactful way to deliver that coaching cue. And that's just one of them with respect to communication. There's a whole other skill set maybe we can talk about, but that's kind of the origin. It's the theme of the content of the book for sure, and the general direction of all the questions and topics in the virtual summit was all around that same concept, this idea that you can't have real impact in really in any world, in any industry. But the one we know is high performance. That's the one that I know from my career. So to have true lasting impact in the world that you're working in the challenging environment of high performance sport, it can't just be about what you know, your degrees, your certifications, your licenses, all the weekend and online courses that we can take. It has to be about who you are and how well you connect and how effectively you deliver your message and your recognition of areas where you need to grow, and your strengths and how they fit into the world that you're working in, and all this other stuff is really fun stuff to talk about, but it's just not talked about enough. So that's kind of the origin of both of the the forums that I've been delivering information in the last year. And I hope it can continue to grow, because I've gotten good response from people. And Mark, this, Chris, this from your time in coaching. It's just it's probably not, like you said, Mark, recognized enough by young professionals, that standard conventional path. Like, we know we have to advance through college and take the exercise physiologies and the motor skill developments and the biomechanics and the nutrition courses, and then probably have a goal to get an advanced degree, and then you got to get your certs and all that. But they don't necessarily recognize enough that there's this whole other skill set that can be grown and developed that really gives you a chance to do well. So I'm going to continue to preach the message, and hopefully it continues to grow.
Well, and I think, for young coaches, even older coaches, I think these are the skills that you need to have and develop and continue to grow with if you're looking to get into a leadership within an athletic department. If your goal is to grow into the athletic director overseeing sports performance, or moving on into the professional ranks where you can become the general manager, you can become the director of operations, you can move outside of the performance world, because as we know, there are very few individuals that have retired as a strength and conditioning coach.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can probably list maybe 5 that have retired. Not been fired, but have retired after a 40-year career in the field. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of my goals, kind of one of our goals for our what we do here. But also one of the things that we're trying to do, we're trying to impart, what can we tell parents for their children and their development as they go from elementary school to high school to college, and then college to maybe professional level. What skills do you see or have seen in the athletes that you've worked with that you could impart on the parents and the athletes that are listening to us right now? What do you see as maybe the top 5 skills? I mean, outside of being blessed and being 6'5" and 195 pounds and 8% body fat that can jump out of the gym, what are the skills that you see, maybe the top 5 skills that you see that keeps those athletes in the league so they can have an extended career?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that, all of us with young children, and, you try to take what you learn in team environments and apply that same type of knowledge to as a parent when you're home. And, we all hope we're doing it the right way and lead our children, the best we possibly can. So when you ask that question, I think I go again, one of the attributes in the book, and one that I've talked about a lot in some of these types of podcasts and some other groups that I've spoken to, is this attribute in the book that I termed hustle. But that was just kind of a global title for these like practical strategies that anyone can do almost immediately to communicate your professionalism and your work ethic, right? And I angled it towards young professionals, like when they're new in an environment where they're just starting out in their first job, like what can you do to earn respect right away, despite not having much time in the game? A young coach walks in, any athlete that looks at him can probably tell they haven't been coaching for 20 years. They're going to look the part of a 24, 25-ish person. So you can't lean on, do this because I know and I've been doing this for a long time. You just don't have that opportunity. So these are little strategies that you can do, and I think they apply well to what you're talking about. And there's 12 of them on the list, but I can just like pull out just a couple of them. The first one, and I should say a lot of these are kind of matter of fact. Like you go over the list, and most people maybe a figurative eye roll and go, well, no shit. Like, of course I shouldn't be late and I should show up early. But the key to this, the real key, you're saying, I'm watching you, Mark. The key is that not everybody does it, right? Not enough people do it. So the ones that do and consistently sustain these habits over the course of a week and a season and a career, and those are the ones that stand out and get the leadership positions and get promoted. And that's the nature of the message. So the first one that I usually talk about it is be early always. And of course we know don't be late. Everybody kind of knows that, but this is more of a mindset is I'm always going to be the first one in the room. An athlete is never, as a coach, an athlete is never going to beat me to a workout. If I have to set up for a workout, my cones, my ladders, my interval stations, right? Everything is going to be set up. And my clients, just like we were talking off camera, right? You have a 5 a.m. workout. You're not rolling in at 4:58, and all the clients, some of them are there waiting, and they're watching you fumble all your stations. You got to find and untie your jump rope everywhere, and everybody's going, yo, dude, like we said, we were going to start at 5. This is different. You are there, you're prepared. Everybody walks in and they're looking at you ready to deliver a big time result, whatever your intentions were in that hour. Same thing for a meeting, right? Everybody's seen the guy that's like, running into a meeting either slightly late or exactly at the time, and they got to pull their book out, they got to pull their laptop out, and they're distracting and all that stuff. It's like, no, like for a young professional, be early, be in the room and allow the meeting leader or whoever else is participating to walk in and go, wow, this dude's here. He's ready to contribute on a big time level. And again, it sounds so matter of fact, but these things stand out. That was just the first one. I'm just kind of running through the list here too. Prepare in advance. That's a big one. So, I use the analogy, right? You look at football sidelines, NFL sidelines, coaches have that big old play chart, right? That literally they pour tons of hours into that week in preparation for that week's opponent. And they watch a ton of film and they study tendencies, right? And they might map out their first couple series of plays in advance. You have all these offensive coordinators looking at this, right? They've prepared. They are more ready for that game. This is probably I would think we all agree on this one. Like you can't just shoot from the hip when you're running a workout. That's not sound training. That's not professional programming. There are real progressions and regressions and individualized attention you should give and put into your program design that you can't just walk in again at 5 a.m. and go, hey guys, we're going to do this today. It's like,
I saw it on YouTube last night. It looks cool.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen that. You bring your phone in and like, hey, I saw this last night. Let's do this today. It's like, come on.
I've told all my young trainers, I'm like, all right, first of all, get rid of your phone and get a watch. Because if you're keeping time, and I got this from Bill Parisi, if you're keeping time on this, what is the parent seeing? The parent seeing you on the phone.
Yeah.
They don't know that you're keeping time.
Yeah.
And that's reality. I mean, perception is reality.
That perception matters without.
And the other thing I would say to piggyback on this, and this goes down to the young professionals who might be going for their interview. If you're going to interview for a position, ask for the people that are going to be participating in the interview process. And get on the website for the school or the team, find out what their position is, find out what they do, and find out all their background, how many years they've been at the school, what they've done. This is preparing you to get that job, and we've both been in the interview process. If you don't know the GM's first name and you're going for a job, how long is that interview going to take?
Yep.
That
is invaluable advice for sure. You just said.
I mean,
I'll add to that, right? Because again, like you, there's so much opportunity to do that type of research literally at your fingertips to learn about who you're interviewing with when you know who's going to be in the room, just like you said, and anybody else that you might be working with, where you can turn that into it's probably like a cold introduction. You probably don't know most of the people you're going to be interviewing with. But if you can look at their lineage, you spend a little bit of time interviewing or researching, you look at their lineage, you'll find out where they've been. You'll find out maybe where they went to undergrad. You'll find out possibly, if you just kind of connect some dots, maybe who they coached with, maybe what teams they were with, and maybe you have some kind of connection dug in there from maybe 2 levels ago, you found somebody that was at some university that you knew the head coach at the time, and now you've warmed up that relationship in that room a little bit instead of just walking into this like strict structured interview and everything. And man, that goes a long way. I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I've when people have asked me about interviews, what should I say? We've talked about that type of thing before, but so important. It really is.
Well,
I think a lot of these principles that you're talking about don't only apply to young coaches, but athletes as well. Especially what you said about, everyone in the beginning of the season is ready to go, but it's a long season, and maintaining that for weeks and months is a really hard thing to do.
Mhm.
I've got a perfect example. My son just recently made a travel basketball team, and I wasn't sure he was going to make it because we just moved to a bigger city, and there's a lot more talent in a bigger pool. And a lot of the kids I was watching had much better skills than him. And I told him, I said, the only way you're going to make this is by doing the hard stuff, hustling, playing hard defense, getting rebounds, diving on the ground, doing all the little things, that, coaches look at. And he did that for tryouts. 2 practices in after making it, he thought he'd made it. He thought he was part of the in crowd, and he started slacking off. And after practice, I gave it to him. I said, no. I said, you know what? I said, did you see what happened at the end of practice? He said, what? I said, you got 10 people on the team. 9 showed up for practice, and you guys played 4-on-4 at the end. Who was sitting out? Oh, well, it was me. Yeah, it was you. That means you're number 9 coming off the bench, kid. So you know what? All that hustle and hard work that you put in to make the team, you've got to keep it going through the whole season, because that's what got you there. And that's essentially what's going to keep you going.
Yep.
But it's what you're saying is applicable to the athletes as well.
It really is.
You look at it like there was a reason Dennis Rodman fit in with the Chicago Bulls. It wasn't because he made the team and he decided that screw this, I'm going to be the top scorer on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to start jacking up threes and I'm going to start bringing the ball up the court. No, I'm going to play defense on their top player, and I'm going to get 20 rebounds a night.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that meme where it was like 3 games, he had 0 points, but like 28 or 27 rebounds?
That's crazy. But that's it. But that was his job.
Yeah. And an important one too.
Without a doubt.
His coach,
he complemented what was on that roster so well, and had the mindset, right, to be that level of a teammate, because that's what that team needed him to be. And not everybody's willing to do that, right? A lot of guys want to be the top scorer all the time, and they want to be, but what a great example of somebody that just fit in and was willing to be the best possible teammate he needed to be, and that led that team to probably much greater success than they would have had without him accepting that role.
Well, it's also the Bill Belichick, line: do your job.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he did his job. He knew what his job was, and he did it. So it's getting back to everything that we've been talking about, and your years in the NBA. What were the qualities that you would look for as the players? As who would you go to when maybe the things weren't going right in the weight room, or things weren't going right with the team chemistry, and how would you address certain aspects of that?
Yeah, I would always look for, typically the older guys, the veterans are the ones that you can lean on to have some influence if you want to alter behavior. Or again, the example we know is, maybe a guy that's a little bit resistant to the strength element of what they need to do. So it's a young guy that maybe doesn't have a long training age, right? And he's a little bit resistant to getting in the weight room. And the old idea that he doesn't know that piece to his overall development is going to be effective, and that's what he needs to do. So you're trying to break down that resistance, and you're trying to find ways to kind of maybe get some insight into how he's wired. How can he be motivated, and how can we get this rookie that doesn't know he needs to even lift at all, let alone show up 3 to 4 times a week and show up at an earlier time than maybe what some other guys need to do. And, you're trying to build successful habits. And what I would do, and that's just one example. There's some other team chemistry stuff that you could talk about, but that was like the recurring challenge, right? As a strength coach in the NBA, and probably a lot of other levels and other sports, that you have guys that aren't wired to want to lift regularly. That just happens. And I would say that again, now let's go to advice to young coaches. It's like the best job you will do in the NBA, to do that job well, it has very little to do with program design. Very little. It has everything to do with understanding how to motivate and how to get through and how to make sure every athlete knows that they're being treated fairly, but you're not going to treat them the same. You can't. You need to understand the individual and how to get through to them and how to motivate them. And they might have a lift scheduled the next day after you arrive from a flight from Charlotte at 1:30 in the morning, and they got to get in before practice because there's real structure to that practice day the next day. And how can you continue to get through to them and make sure that they stay with those habits? So to answer your question, a lot of times you would identify maybe some of the respected older veterans, maybe even somebody that went through that same evolution to begin with, maybe a guy that was a little bit resistant to strength training and the structure of a sound nutrition program and good professional habits, but saw his way through to the other side. And that's what defined his career and why maybe he is still in the league at 10, 11, 12 plus years. And you pull him aside and you lean on him and you say, hey, can you give me a little bit of help that I've tried, right? I've attempted to get through to this person in every way that I kind of know how, with a little bit of success, but not the level where it's totally registering all the time. What do you know about him, first of all? Do you know a different tactic that I can or should take? And if I do those, would you be willing to maybe nudge him a little bit too, as that salty veteran in the locker room that has a much different opportunity than even I would as the strength coach, and help me out and push him a little bit. And the really good ones, again, if you grab the right ones, they'll go, I got you, dog. I got you. They know exactly what you're asking for. They've probably been asked before, or they probably saw those habits themselves in another environment.
It's
so
interesting
that was always a good one. Yeah.
It's interesting that at that level, you're still finding people who maybe from where you said haven't lifted before and, still need to be taught. Because we've had a couple of collegiate coaches on the program, probably 2 or 3, say, basketball players in particular are tough. Some of them, it's hard to get them into the weight room because they just want to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And, I can see that if you're getting away with that, if you're putting up the numbers and, maybe you're not getting injured, you could probably avoid that for some time. Yeah. Is there a lot of guys in the NBA who have not lifted when they get there, or just really aren't doing it through their career?
Yeah, I won't say it's a lot. And I will absolutely say that, again, let's go back to, last year when I was with the team, much better in 2020 than it was in 2010. And I would guess it's much better relative to this topic than it was in 1995. The evolution is one, as more young guys come through to the league and were exposed to private training centers, right? Where maybe they did some performance training as a high school athlete or in their AAU years, and they get exposed to better structure within their college programs, that they spent some time under really good university strength coaches that taught them the ways of what high level athletes do from a training environment. So I, without a doubt, better now than it was before. But all that being said, it's not as common as you would think it is, where every single guy comes in the weight room and is like, yes, this is part of my regular program all the time. You don't even have to track me down, Jess. I'm going to be here 3 times a week, all year, all season long. And oh, by the way, I'm going to train 6 days a week in the off season. Like, there's not that. There are still elements probably on every roster of guys that if you did not kind of grab them by the shoulder and say, hey, we got to get our lift in, that they probably wouldn't regularly do it themselves. And really, if you go to like the compassion, empathy, understanding side of it, you said it a little bit, Chris. These guys have, we use the term gotten away with. They've always been the most gifted and the most talented at every level they've played at, probably from the time they were 8 to 10 to 12 years old, and have been probably worlds better at playing their sport than their peers at almost every single age group. And most people perceive the weight room as a performance enhancer, right? It takes a little bit of education from a good strength coach to go, well, hang on. Yes, it absolutely is going to help you run faster, jump higher, change of direction, agility, all that stuff. But the real gold is in the injury risk reduction. We can, when programmed right, reduce your risk of injury, prolong a career, keep you in the lineup more throughout the season, all that stuff. Younger kids, younger athletes don't necessarily think of it that way. If they did, I think there would be more compliance, right? But everybody thinks about like, hey, you're going to get me a 45-inch vertical jump, but I already have 39 and I hate lifting. So why do I need to come in and see you? And that's kind of the mentality, because they've always been better than others relative to their sport. And then you see the 8, 9, 10-year guys that go, I'm injured, right? I have these tendinopathies. I have all these aches and dings and all that stuff. And I'm
getting old.
Getting old and a lot of mileage, right? A lot of physiological load, right? And training load on their bodies. That they, a lot of times those resistant guys early in the career, they come around and say, all right, it's about time to commit to this.
Now, and for those that don't know, longevity equals more contract.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that aren't understanding, longevity in a professional sport means I get another contract. I get another 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And for those that didn't see it, I think last week or maybe the beginning of this week, Aaron Gordon just signed for 4 years and $92 million with the Denver Nuggets. I might be a little off on that, but I think that's close to what he's getting paid. So 4 years at 92, what's that break down to, like $23 million a year?
Mm-hmm.
About. Actually, right on the money. Good job for me. That's my rain. That's the Rain Man in me.
Yeah.
So $23 million a year. Do the math. That's $2 million a month. Figure it out from there. I'm not even going to do 82 games.
Yeah. So. And that's 1 4-year contract. This is probably his 3rd deal, I think. Yeah, probably 2nd, right?
Yeah, so I think it might be 3rd.
Right. So rookie contracts, it's 2 to 4 years, depending on team options and everything. Let's just say he's in his 3rd deal. So he's in roughly his 7th or 8th or 9th year, right? I don't know off the top of my head, but now we're talking longevity. You're talking long careers. At the end of 4, he's right on that borderline at about 12 years or so, where you're like, hey, do you re-sign Aaron Gordon, or is he aging enough that maybe we don't necessarily, the 30 teams in the NBA might be questioning whether he's worthy of an NBA roster or not. He probably is, but if he's not healthy, right, and his body hasn't held up to the degree that he can play at year 13, 14, and 15 from all of these good habits that we're talking about, he may not be able to withstand another NBA season, right? And that could be, he might lose out on those additional 1 or 2 year deals that a lot of those veterans get at year 14, 15, 16, 18. Yeah.
And the league
are you doing more functional stuff with the NBA guys, or are you doing traditional things like bench and squat and deadlift? And if so, what kind of weight is an average NBA player throwing up in all 3 of those?
My personal philosophy was always, rooted in pushing and pulling heavyweight, for sure. I mean, I never have, as open as my philosophy was over the years to learning alternative training and being prepared for some of the more, to use your term, functional, or some of the other training philosophies that have come out through the years. I was always open to learning and being prepared to potentially implement them in our program. The route was always basic movements, squats, pushes, pulls, hinges, all that stuff, and make sure we do those. And then you can move into like the balance and the proprioception and, maybe some of the corrective exercises to address asymmetries and all of that other smaller complementary stuff. That was just my personal philosophy. around the NBA, it's a mixed bag. It really is probably tied to first the strength coach's philosophy, right alongside of hopefully the player's individual needs. And I would do this a lot with veteran players, again, particularly the 9-10 year guys that may have had a strong college program and spent time with maybe 2 or 3 other really good NBA strength coaches, particularly early on in their time with the team. Is like, hey, you know your body better than I do at this point, so I'm going to learn a little bit from you, right? He may have learned over the years that a single leg squat variation, a unilateral movement, works better for him than me putting him under a squat bar with a barbell on his back, right? Or there are some guys that, again, let's go late into the years where, their knees aren't able to complete successfully and without injury some movement patterns, right? Or some lower body patterns. So you kind of lean on them a little bit to give you a little bit of guidance in terms of exercise selection. And then from there, yeah, hopefully it's an individualized approach for a combination of what is going to help the player reach their goals, keep them healthy, help them reach their goals, and in line with the philosophy that is right from the coach. To answer your question about who's the strongest and who's throwing around the most weight and everything.
Well, not necessarily, just
yeah.
kind of a range, of an NBA athlete, just
yeah.
What's the range look like?
Yeah, the body types are so different, right? When you look at a perimeter point guard who is mostly speed and change of direction, right? And he's running the offense on the outside, to maybe a traditional post player who might be anywhere near 7 feet and 280 plus pounds. There's a huge range. What I would say is some of the more functionally strong guys are the ones that seem to be the most resilient relative to their position, right? Again, injury risk reduction. Those are guys that put enough time into the weight room that they've gotten strong for their own body size, and can withstand the rigors of running up and down the court, upwards of like 200 plus times over the course of a 7 o'clock game and everything. So yeah, that's probably the best way I can describe that.
Yeah.
Have you seen the picture? There was a picture posted on Instagram or Facebook, and it was a picture of Kevin Durant with the ball in his hand on the wing with a cutoff shirt. And I mean, he's huge now.
Yeah, a recent picture. Yes,
it was recent, and I think, and I've told this story on this before.
I almost wondered if it was photoshopped. Right? It did.
Exactly.
He's as thick and as wired as he's ever looked. Yeah.
I mean, he had the arms of like Dwight Howard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, oh dear God, like, good luck, league.
Yeah.
Because I think, and this story, because it happened at the combine, because one of the tests is the 185-pound bench press.
Mm-hmm.
And he came in there from his 1 year at Texas.
Yeah.
And I don't think he did it once.
Yep.
And he got off the bench. He took note of everybody that was snickering at him.
Yeah.
He's kept that back in his brain.
Uh-huh.
And he's been in the league how many years now? 15?
Yep.
So, and he's got a couple NBA championships.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still very motivated to get back at every single one of those people in that room that laughed at him.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, it's a longevity thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Even at that level, arguably one of the top 5 players in the league, still coming off an Achilles,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Achilles and ACL, or just the Achilles?
I think it was the Achilles. Yeah.
Okay. And that's a horrible injury for basketball. It's a horrible injury for anything, but for basketball, where it's explosive, it's a lot of jumping, it's a lot of running, horrible injury. But I think you're going to see a whole new Kevin Durant this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's going to impose his will on the league.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a good team too, and that helps, but I think he's going to take it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if that body size, right, and that frame right now is any indication of his commitment to his return to play, and his off season, where obviously he wasn't at 100% last year and coming back from the injury, put on top of an already advanced skill set, and you said top 5 player in the league, he may go down as top 20 or 25 players ever, right? Yeah. And maybe I'm even being a little conservative with that number. It might be even higher than that. Yeah, he's a dangerous player surrounded by a really strong roster, and that team is gonna that team is going to be impressive this year for sure. You know, again, you always put that qualifier provided they can all stay healthy. Yeah.
Is there a downside to basketball players getting too strong?
Yeah, yeah. I've answered this question a lot too, that in terms of you know, programming and the dance of volume versus intensity. The genetic fast twitch athlete that arrives into the NBA, right? That's drafted into the NBA. If you don't program right, they will absolutely get much bigger than they need to be for their sport in a pretty quick amount of time. They're adapters, right? They respond to intensity, which is putting weight on the bar very quickly with hypertrophy and the type of muscle physiology that's they're made up of. So again, coming off the bulk of my strength coach years coming into the NBA were spent in football, where that's a little bit less of an issue. You're generally pushing heavyweight all the time, and hypertrophy is a goal all the time. And in a contact sport like that, you want to be probably as big as you can be without sacrificing speed and explosiveness, right? And there are some positions in the NBA where you would tie that same goal to it. But there are other ones where, you know, maybe that is a disadvantage for sure, and you don't want to add muscle to a frame, too much muscle to a frame, I should say, right? That will take them away from the game that it is they want to play, and you know, maybe the specific qualities that they actually need to succeed in the sport of basketball. And not to mention, you know, some of them just don't want to be that heavy. They don't like that, have to carry around that amount of weight that they could put on pretty quickly if you push weights too heavy. So yeah, programming was my introduction to adjusted programming in terms of volume and intensity, much different in the NBA. It's a big adjustment that I had to make early on versus some of the other sports that I had worked with before.
I'm going to tap on your expertise and kind of take it back the other way to youth athletes, specifically basketball players. But, you know, us basketball players that end up playing in high school or beyond, you know, we're typically taller and went through a pretty intense growth spurt. And, you know, you're playing the sport, and as you know, it's a lot of pounding, it's a lot of abuse on the body. And during that growth spurt, it hurts. Is there anything a young person who's playing basketball, who's going through this growth phase, can do to help their bodies out so that they avoid injury and they grow properly?
Yeah, my answer is basics, and attention to, you know, I'll call it, you know, maybe the word is mobility, but I would just say full range of motion. I think normally when kids go through those growth spurts, and you're talking about the ages of what, like 14 to 17, 13, you know, that adolescent age where they do hit puberty and all of a sudden they shoot up. You know, that's when a lot of times motor skills suffer a little bit, right? And I think exposure to basics will counteract that as best as possible. And what I mean by that is just basic squat patterns. Don't lose sight of teaching a kid how to squat properly during that phase, even if it isn't with load, right? Even if you're just emphasizing a perfect squat technique with good range of motion, that he doesn't lose the mobility that he needs at all of those joints as he's growing. I would say the same thing at the shoulder. If you look at the injury risk areas, right, the hot spot areas for basketball, if you just attack mobility at the thoracic spine, the upper back, the hips, and the ankle, you're going to stay out in front of that for the most part, right? Again, nothing's 100% or foolproof, but if you can maintain or develop good mobility in the ankle, right? Good dorsiflexion and good range when you're squatting, mobile hips, a strong core, right? And a somewhat mobile thoracic spine where they can fully extend and move their shoulders and all that stuff. Like, that's going to help that growth, you know, of all the joints, right? And his muscles and his bones that are growing during that time. It's going to help it adapt where they might be less awkward during that period. And nobody's saying you'll turn them into the most agile, mobile athlete out there, but it is probably a complementary set of tools that can help that for a kid that's growing that quickly.
I love when athletes go to doctors and they tell the doctor that their knee hurts, and the doctor just looks at their knee. I'm like, all right, I had a swimmer that I was working with who swam breaststroke. And she's like, my doctor tells me my knee hurts. I'm like, all right, let's do an overhead squat pattern. She put her arms up over her head. She went down in a squat, valgus at the knees, couldn't get all the way down, went torso over her knees. I was like, it's not your knee, it's your ankle and your hips that you have no mobility in. And then just think about what you're doing. You're doing that breaststroke kick 1,000 times a day against resistance. Even though it's water, it's still resistance. So your hips are so tight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as we both know, if there's an issue at the knee, it's either being caused by a lack of mobility in the ankle or in the hip.
Go ahead, Mark, say it, and then we're going to put it on a
Above and
t-shirt.
below.
Which one?
You're lying about the knee.
It's the dumbest joint in the body.
Put it on a t-shirt.
It's the dumbest joint in the body. It goes wherever the ankle and hip tells it to go.
Mhm.
And I stole that from somebody. I forgot who I did, but I mean, that's the reality of it. It's like, prove me wrong. I mean, try and turn your knee to the outside. Let me know how you do that. Well, you externally rotate your hip.
Yep.
It's just, I mean, unless somebody's got a different body than everybody else on the planet, that's just the reality of it. Or you got or you've got a very mobile knee joint, and that's not going to be good either.
Probably not going to be a good thing. Yeah, right.
The one
That's a
thing,
great point. Yeah.
the other thing I'd like to touch on is the importance of nutrition, because I think the NBA has gotten a lot better. I think the athletes going into the league have gotten more exposed to a strength and conditioning program.
Mhm.
But I think where a majority of them are still lacking is their nutrition and their recovery.
Mhm.
Can you just touch a little bit on that and the importance of it as how it affects performance?
Sure. And I wouldn't disagree with that, although I would put it in the same category as I said about athletes' openness to structured strength training. It's definitely better today than it was, again, go back 5, 10, 15 years as reference points, because of the work of a lot of good practitioners. And this is really important from a nutrition standpoint. We all know that to do nutrition well, it takes a little bit of commitment, right? Financial commitment, really, from a team standpoint, to eat healthy and to eat right. You have to have support from the top down from a budget standpoint to say, okay, like when we are in our team eating environments, we're going to do it right. And we're going to source good food, and we're going to hire good people at home to prepare the food the right way. And we're going to bring in a good dietitian to advise all of that. And then when we go on the road, we're going to kind of take the same philosophy and make sure there's consistency with all of our eating environments and everything. So that takes a big commitment. And I say that because that was the evolution of our nutrition program with the Sixers, where it went from, in my early years, you'd probably call it very average. And then we grew it to one that, across the board, we were very proud of, and would put it up there probably with any of the professional teams in the country, I would think, with the staff that we hired, our dietitian that was advising it, and the level of commitment we put into the quality of food that we put it in front of the athletes every day. But to answer your question about the importance, gosh, we keep using this word in this talk. They're differentiators, right? They're difference makers, because you arrive in the NBA as an athlete, 450 of them. The number's a little bigger now with two-way guys, but roughly 15 guys per 30 roster, and all of them can play ball. And all of them know you got to put time in on the court and practice, right? And, practice before, practice after. But then there's these habits, not unlike soft skills that we're talking about with coaches and high performance pros and everything. There's these other little smaller things that not everybody does regularly or consistently enough to reap the benefits. And nutrition is one of them, right? Every guy, all of us have the chance to pick what it is we want to put into our body for the most part. And do you make the right choices that fuel your performance? And, in that, post practice, right? And are you getting enough protein throughout the day to make sure that you are assisting in muscle protein synthesis and laying the foundational blocks to recover from your workouts and everything? And, basketball and all sports out there, you need adequate carbohydrate. And are you doing that? And are you choosing the right sources of all of those to really make a difference? So the education is better for sure. I think the emphasis from a team perspective is better. I think teams are putting better resources in when the athletes and the players are actually eating in the team eating environments, which is normally like breakfast and lunch on most days, and then some dinners on the road. But what choices are the athletes making when they're home? If we are it's a home practice day, you're going home and you're eating dinner at night, right? Where are you going? Are you hitting the fast food joint on the way home, or will you learn from all the food that we put in front of you all of the other days and maybe select those types of food, lean proteins and good carbohydrates, and put some colorful vegetables on your plate? I
Did you
think my
guys
big, yeah.
did you guys have a chef on staff?
Yeah, we went big with that, and that was, gosh, again, if I could say something about that 76ers team that I would put, top of class against probably any pro team, I would say definitely in the country, but even any pro environments, it was our food program toward, since we moved into that Camden facility and everything. We hired an unbelievable executive chef, and he hired an incredible staff. We had like 3 or 4 full-time chefs, and a dietitian that was quarterbacking all the recipes and everything. My role was to oversee that, but I was the one of those 3 that traveled, so that we, as best as possible, can duplicate those efforts on the road, because you spend half your life on the road, right? You're eating in planes, you're eating in hotels, you're eating and visiting team arenas all the time. Like, you can't just lose sight of good nutrition when you're out at away games. So that was
How
my
did you,
role, to make sure everything's consistent.
how about hydration? Because I imagine, obviously, it's probably arguably maybe the most important in terms of what you're putting in your body,
Sure.
but it's also elusive too, because they give you an average person should take 8 ounce glasses. Well, you're not dealing with an average size person, number one, or
Yep.
average activity. And as an athlete, you're thirsty during a game or practice, and you're drinking. You're not measuring.
Yep.
So what kind of cues are you using with your players in terms of adequate hydration?
Yeah, we actually did for a couple of years, bring in outside organizations. One of them was the Gatorade Sports Science Institute, to do actual sweat testing to understand our players' fluid needs, right? Fluid loss, and the composition of that fluid, right? Your electrolyte breakdown, and had some real hard data on what our guys needed from a replenishment standpoint. And from a volume standpoint, we saw some trends, right? Generally, like a body type and a heavy sweater would need, this certain amount roughly. And then, the electrolyte components were, different in terms of salt loss and everything like that. We did see some trends there as well. But doing that for a couple of years did give us some good, at least, reference points for the hydration needs in general of the basketball athlete. But from there, it's more like we took a generalized approach in some years where it's just fluid availability. Make sure it's always there, and make sure in all of your breaks, all the timeouts during a game, and all the water breaks, and encourage the coaching staff to give water breaks, that they're consuming fluid every time, even if it's not like objectively measured and we know exactly what they're taking in. We did do that in some years, and then other years it seemed, or it kind of was deemed impractical. But without a doubt, you never lose sight of it. You're always talking to the athletes, whether it's weight room environment, training room, on the table during practice. Guys, make sure you're getting your fluids. And if you're kind of that level of pain in the ass and guys drink in every opportunity, you're probably close to getting what it is you need in that controlled environment. It's not like we're out in like heat and humid environments and you're playing outside and you have to deal with all of those uncontrollables. Like, for the most part, when you're playing basketball, you're inside and you're in an air conditioned environment, and the demands aren't as much as if we were outside playing football on a 98-degree day. Yeah.
In terms of that, whatever it is, FDA recommendation for the average person, which is a half a gallon, are we, for an NBA athlete, we talking they need a gallon more? Like, what's that level for them?
Yeah, again, it's all individualized. We kind of categorize them as like heavy sweat. If they were a big body and a heavy sweater, we would know there was some amount that they needed more than like the normal person. And then there were guys that we would categorize as light sweaters, and they weren't losing a lot of fluid that way. And maybe some of the smaller guys, and you would know you could pull back on their total amounts. But we would have guys, we would drink from those green sideline Gatorade bottles, right? And those are, I believe, 64-ounce bottles, maybe 32-ounce bottles. Yep, I could be mistaken that, but we would have guys that would go through 3 or 4 of those in a game for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Constantly refilling them and making sure they have what they need. Yeah.
Awesome. Coach, where can people find you, contact you, your socials?
Yeah, so my probably biggest social media presence is on Instagram. I've never been big on Twitter or Facebook, and you can find me at Jesse K Wright, JESSEKWRIGHT. Love interacting on direct message, and fairly regular posting up there, mostly on this topic of soft skills and high performance. I'm on LinkedIn, very active, kind of messaging on there as well. And then it's still in development, but maybe by the time this podcast is out or sometime soon, the Balance the Bar website will be complete. It'll have a lot of resources in and around interpersonal skills and high performance. There's there's an education section, right, to teach, and some free content that people can learn, and you can easily contact me there as well. So that's balancethebar.com. And then the final plug for the book, right? You can find it on Amazon, right? As Mark brought up early on. Right now it's available on Amazon. You can just do the search for The Intent Is to Grow. But when the website's finished, you'll be able to purchase it on there as well.
Awesome, Coach. Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming on today, and good luck with everything you got going on.
Thank you so much. Huge appreciation and gratitude to you guys. This was awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, Jesse, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and your continued support and friendship. It's meant a lot to me. I mean, over the last 2 decades, with everything that we both got going on in our life and our professional career, for you to take the time out and really continue to help and support me achieve what I want to achieve, and the continued support means the world to me. So thank you very much for everything.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I always learn something when we talk and in all of our conversations as well. So it's a two-way street, and I would thank you.
Okay, and I appreciate that. You're like, God, this guy's a moron. So, guys, like I said, Balance the Bar. If you haven't gone on and checked out the symposium, the seminar, I strongly recommend that. It was a great thing, and one of those resources that you got to have, because you can keep going back and keep learning more every time you go back on it. So, Jesse, thank you very much for your time. Everybody, I am Mark Spellman.
I'm Chris Schrade. We are the Athlete Hackers. Tune in next time. Peace.
All my best. God bless. Thank you. Peace. We're out of here.